Shalom, Kohalo Yahweh Bashem Yahushua Bahashem HaKakodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of GMS, including the elders that came before them that taught us the truth. The shalom and salutations to all the brothers out pushing the word of truth and in sincerity. The hopeful elect tabernacle of David. On the brother Yahshua, back with the WW3 Daily update. Shalom and salutations to you as well. All right, so this is going to be more pursuant to yesterday as far as scripture, but I found something by this colonel who is whose perspective is I believe it's more on point. In the comment section they're trying to come against him, but anyway, we'll start right here at Jeremiah 51 like we did yesterday, and 51 and 28. Yeah, but we'll read this first. Babylon's punishment. Okay, now we're dealing with Babylon. This isn't ancient Babylon. This is Babylon the Great. All right, the time that we're at right now. Ancient Babylon is Iraq. All right, so Iraq is not even in this war yet. When I say the war, I'm talking about World War III and what's going on in Eastern Europe right now. All right, so we'll come down here to 28. Prepare against her. Who is her? Babylon. America. Okay. Prepare against her the nations with the kings of the Medes. The nations with the kings of the Medes goes back to the USSR, the Soviet Union, which is dismantled at the moment. Right here where it says Medes, that's the Russians. The captains thereof, Slovakia, and the rulers thereof, and all the land of his dominion. So all the surrounding countries that used to be called the Soviet Union, the Most High is preparing against America. All right. So with that, let's listen to, this is Judge Napolitano, Judging Freedom Channel. This is yesterday, one day ago, Ukraine-Russia war, Colonel Douglas McGregor of the United States Armed Forces. Let's see what he has to say. All right. Very measured, even-keeled, if you will. And this guy's got a knowledge of how Russia fights and how the United States fight.
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, November 8th, 2022, Election Day in the United States, midterm elections. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States. Our guest today is our most recognizable guest, Colonel Douglas McGregor. Colonel, it's always a pleasure to be with you. Colonel, you informed me last evening of something I had seen in the New York Times, but not with the specificity with which you informed me. And that is Jake Sullivan, who is President Biden's national security advisor, has been meeting with people in the Russian government, perhaps his opposite number, whatever the national security advisor to President Putin is called, perhaps some people very close to President Putin, perhaps some people in the Russian Ministry of Defense. And you have sources telling you that if he said what your sources tell you he said, the public needs to know about this. It's not only dumb, it's potentially devastating. So take the ball on this, please, Colonel, and run with it as best you can.
Sure. There are two sources, really. One is the Wall Street Journal, which is probably the best. And then there was also mention of this in the New York Times. And you have to read carefully because it starts out by saying that Jake Sullivan, for whatever reason, is the only member of the White House contingent right now who is in contact with Putin's government. And we're not sure.
Oh, Slovakia.
When you hand someone your logo sticker, you...
This damn devil. All right, here we go.
And we're not sure what that means. Are these back channels? Are these direct face-to-face meetings? Are these calls? That was not made clear. Secondly,
Right, so let me stop you. Is this unusual, or does the Secretary of State, for example, normally talk to the Russian foreign minister? Does the U.S. ambassador to Moscow talk to somebody in the Russian government on a regular basis?
normally, I think the Secretary of State would do the talking with the Russian foreign minister, but his meetings with Mr. Lavrov have been so tense and problematic. I don't think there would be much to discuss.
Okay.
Frankly, I think the Russian foreign minister is finished listening to anything Mr. Blinken says. By the way, I think
Okay,
that's probably true for the Chinese foreign minister as well.
And as far as we know, has Jake Sullivan been to Moscow or some neutral site, or is all of this via electronic means, Zoom or telephone or whatever they use?
Well, that's the whole point. My supposition, based upon what I read in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, is it was probably electronic. Whether, again, that was a back channel message, an exchange there, or people talk to each other as you and I are talking right now, we just don't know. The two people he spoke to, one was a former Russian ambassador to Washington, and the other gentleman had been the head of the FSB, and you could probably characterize him as close as you're going to get to a national security advisor.
Okay, FSB is what are the
secret-
English initials for what succeeded the KGB.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
And
so it
it's
would
not
be
exactly the same.
Okay, it would be like somebody talking to the head of the FBI or the head of the CIA.
Right, pretty much. And he
Okay.
obviously, this man is extremely well connected and he's close to President Putin. Now, there wasn't a whole lot said about what the Russians said, only about what Jake Sullivan allegedly discussed. And of course, they said he was talking about an interest in containing the conflict to ensure that it did not grow or expand beyond the current borders of Ukraine, which is completely legitimate, makes perfect sense. There wasn't much detail, but there was also the implication that once again, he had threatened the Russians with unknown consequences if they use nuclear weapons. Well, that seems ridiculous because the Russians are the ones that have always said no, and they've simply responded to loose talk in Washington or by statements from the president or others about the use of nuclear weapons. The Russian side had very little to say, but when they were asked, the official spokesman said they discussed red lines. Now, red line is very important because red line means you go this far and something happens. There are consequences to your action. There was no discussion of the details about the red lines, but that's what the Russians said. In addition, allegedly, Jake Sullivan talked about, the best way to put this is the dangers of escalation, and wasn't explicitly nuclear at all. He simply said, we see evidence that you, Russia, are preparing to escalate this conflict, which is true. This is what we've been talking about, these offensives. And we're warning you against that. The unspoken implication at this point is that we're prepared to jump into this conflict in some way because we will not allow you to partition Ukraine. We will not allow you to fight and win this war on your terms.
Okay, a couple of questions. One, correct me if I'm wrong. Ukraine has been partitioned for a long time, has it not?
No. They're talking about the Leninist Soviet construct, which we accepted at the end of the Cold War as the legitimate borders of Ukraine, even though that trapped millions of Russians in the east inside Ukraine where they had never been before. In other words, they were not Ukrainians. So living inside Ukraine was meaningless because Ukraine was not very meaningful in the context of the Soviet Union.
Okay, that's what I meant. I guess I didn't use the right terminology. You used the word threat. Do you know if Sullivan mentioned directly or indirectly the presence of 40,000 American troops, the 101st Airborne in Poland?
Well, we don't, but we think, based upon the language that has sort of leaked out, that was in that paragraph that I received from another source, that he did imply that they had 90,000 troops in Poland and Romania, and that potentially, if Russia escalated presumably on the scale that we think the Russians will escalate, that we might be prepared to jump in.
Boom. Who is the fight between? The fight is between who? The fight is between the Medes and the Babylonians. Or you could say the Russians and the Americans. That's what they're discussing right now. If you don't understand the language, I'll play that again. Napolitano says, we already got troops in Romania and in Poland waiting to jump in the fight. And this guy is saying, well, the back channel, the one person that's talking to the Russians, let them know, hey, here's what's going to happen. So what's being said? What's being said is what the scriptures are telling you, all right? That the fight is between Russia and will see what's happening in Russia right now by the taking of the Ukraine is that the Soviet Union is being reformed, okay, pursuant to Ezekiel 38, okay?
He did imply that they had 90,000 troops in Poland and Romania, and that potentially, if Russia escalated, presumably on the scale that we think the Russians will escalate, that we might be prepared to jump in. And that we would jump in with 40,000 US troops, 30,000 Polish troops, and 20,000 Romanian troops.
Well, that's 90,000 troops. I mean, would Sullivan, who's not a military person, be foolish, even crazy enough to issue a threat that he knows would make its way directly to President Putin?
Well, I'm not sure that, he gave them great details. I think he made it clear that we are in a position to intervene. Clearly, the Russians know exactly what we have on the ground in Poland and in Romania. I mean, Judge, there are so many sleeper cells and observers and agents all up and down Eastern Europe with everything from cell phones to whatever you want to report on everything that happens. It's not funny. I mean, for instance, during the Kosovo air campaign, every time our aircraft lifted off the ground in Italy, it was immediately transmitted how many aircraft had lifted off, which direction they flew, and what they were carrying. So this was for the Serbs. So, the Russians have exactly the same, probably much better information. Plus, they have all the satellite arrays and space-based intelligence. They have the equivalent of the NSA. They certainly know what we're doing.
All right, I'll end it right there. If you want to watch the rest of this, it's another 12 minutes going in. And it's just great information, All right, so, and again, this is Judge Napolitano, Judging Freedom's channel, and he's interviewing Colonel Douglas McGregor, not MacArthur. All right, Ukraine and Russia war. All right, so that, it's just a little update on where this thing is going. Where is this thing going? What are they explaining right now? How the war is going to escalate, how the United States, Babylon the Great, is going to get directly involved now, all right? And that's going to happen when hell freezes over, or the battlefield, which is known as Greater Russia, when that land freezes, that's when Russia's going to make their move, and it's going to go down crazy. Again, right here, Jeremiah 51 and 28, prepare against her, this is God, prepare against Babylon, the nations of the kings of the Medes. What does it mean? The nations with the kings of the Medes. Plural, not just Russia. All of those surrounding countries that used to be known as the Soviet Union, the captains thereof and all the rulers thereof, and all the land of his dominion. Whose dominion? The Medes. This is talking about the Most High is putting hooks in Russia's jaws and making them get that old Soviet spirit back on them, described right here. Ezekiel 38:1. I'll start at 2. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog. This is Russia. The chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him and say, thus saith the Lord power, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Now here's where the Soviet Union spirit comes back. And I will turn thee back. Back to what? Back to that old Soviet Union, and put hooks into thy jaw, turn you around, take you back, and bring thee forth, and all thine army and horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Okay, so basically that says, I'm gonna put that old Soviet spirit back on you. I'm gonna turn you back to the days of the Soviet Union, and then here are all of the allies: Persia, Ethiopia, Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, right, and Turkey and Syria. Okay, and then all of these: be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Who is Russia being a guard unto right now? Okay. Well, who just struck a deal after the petrodollar fell apart? Who did Saudi Arabia go to for protection? Russia. Be thou a guard unto them. All right, so that's enough for today. We got one more daily update tomorrow. We hope that the elect were edified with this. You brothers and sisters, with that, I don't say shalom.